Just Return, episode 42. This chapter, my friends, was originally called Leaving. Belinda was the first awake the next morning, and she busied herself preparing breakfast for 10. She listened as she worked to the forest sounds, the bird calls, the distant whisper of the waterfall, the howlers and other monkey calls. She found a tear rolling down her cheek and wondered why. She was rescued, saved, delivered. Soon she would be back in Salisbury with her old friends and at university in Southampton to continue her studies. Duncan wouldn't be there, of course, and her heart ached about that. But this tear was not for Duncan. In the innermost chambers of her thoughts, Bella had become part of the forest. Her neighbours here were the parrots, the howler monkeys, the spider monkeys, the heron-like birds she regularly encountered at the waterfall, the trees, the strangler figs, and most of all, the Indians. When she left, she knew she would long to be with them again. She really did want the best of both worlds, modern Salisbury and Southampton, and the seemingly unchangeable wild rainforest. When she thought about Taliki and Likla, her eyes burned and more tears fell. Her thoughts were broken by her mother's voice behind her. "Well, Belle, shall we go to the waterfall and wash?" Soon the two women were at the falls, and Belle surprised her mother by producing soap, deodorant and a towel. She explained that Gus had scavenged around the crash scene and gathered everything he could before the forest claimed it. But she kept the deodorant for special occasions. Her mother smiled and said, "Have you been crying, Belle? Listen, I understand. It's not just Duncan, Mum. I know, it's the forest and the people, isn't it?" "Yes, how do you know?" "When we left Ireland, Belinda, I knew it was for the best. I didn't want you to grow up like your poor father. Thomas Devlin was a good man, but republicanism cost him his life. You were already full of all the rhetoric." "Was I?" "Yes, and you were out with your mates throwing stones at the army and the police too." "I remember that. I almost remember it as if it's something I've read in a book." "Well, you're half Irish, but I just felt if I could get you out of it, you might be able to get a more normal life somewhere." "Yes, Mum, and you gave me that. But do you remember the weekend before we left?" "You mean the big family party, Mum?" "Yes, neighbours, family." Christine smiled. Two of the men that were there were on the run. Are on the run in the Republic now. There was Irish dancing, traditional music, and so much love. I never realised until that night how much my in-laws actually loved me. And you. When we got home, I cried my eyes out for half the night. I never knew that. Belle, I miss Ireland. I miss West Belfast. Why do you think we went over to stay with Auntie Finola so much?" "Trouble is, I wanted Salisbury too. So I do understand. But you could go back to Ireland, Mum." "That's true, and I do, but listen to me. In the future, you can come back here if you want to." But I'd thought a little about that. Her mother continued, "Stephen thinks you are absolutely his star student of all time. He says that there have been others with your sense, but none with your passion." She took her daughter's hand as they stood together in the stream of water. "When we were coming up the river with the Indians from the other tribe, we heard chainsaws. Loggers, illegal too, I expect." "Oh yes. The poor Indians were terrified. They will be needing help from us, Belle. You have a lot of your dad's spirit about you, and I did respect his desire for change. I couldn't ever really admire the violence. However, here the people have a way of life, undisturbed until now, and now they're being disturbed by the murderous system around us that's changing. You don't need me to tell you that, do you?" Belle nodded. "Life for them's not easy, but it's good." "How far away were these loggers?" "Oh, some miles up the river, down the river. But the Indians were really afraid." "Were they afraid of the saws?" No, I don't think so. I think it was the people. I think there may well have been trouble already. Something about the whole thing had them really afraid. When we arrived, they were afraid of us. Someone in the civilized world needs to really stand up for those people. Well, that's something to think about. But right now I have to concentrate on getting home, I guess. And what about Gus? Is he happy to be going home, do you think? What do you ask, Mum? Well, there's something about his manner, as if he's a man with little to return to. Well, he's a German, but he stayed in Britain, and he's some friends, not close friends. His parents are dead, and his only brother died in the fighting in Africa. His fiancée was killed when Britain bombed Dresden, along with thousands of others. Oh dear. Yeah, Dad's lot in the IRA are not the only ones with blood on their hands, you know. Gus never recovered from that. Her voice tailed off. War did terrible things to him, Mum. She wanted to tell her mum all about Gus, but she knew that it would just be giving her mother the same problem she had, a moral dilemma. The man who saved my daughter's life is a Nazi war criminal. No, she didn't want to do that to her mum. She had to decide whether she would tell, or whether she'd just leave it all covered up. The heron-like bird settled on the bank of the river and walked down onto a muddy bank to see what was on the menu today. Belle stood close to the waterfall and made a silent vow to it that she would return one day. When Belle and her mother arrived back at the camp, everyone was sitting around the campfire eating, and there was an air of excitement, except for Gus. He was sitting next to one of the Indians, showing him how to use the fish hooks. The native was looking a bit sceptical, and Gus, for his part, was looking very sad. Sad was an understatement for how he felt. Here he had real purpose. Every day of life was a challenge, but a delightful one. Belle had given him purpose since the crash, and now she had other rescuers. He was delighted for her and for her mother, but felt that he had even less to live for than before. Nothing was certain anymore. In 1938 all had seemed clear. The Nazi ideology would swamp Europe and Germany would be a great nation. Enemies would fall and a new world would emerge with a Germanic Aryan master race in control. He'd been totally convinced. Now Gus was convinced of absolutely nothing. He wasn't sure about politics, religion, God, himself, or the future. He wasn't sure about Belinda either. If she told the story, what then? Would this elderly Nazi rot in a jail somewhere? Well, maybe. But maybe dying for something was better than living for nothing, was it? Or did he even believe in it all anymore? Sometimes in the forest, living like they did, he'd forgotten that he'd ever been anywhere else. Dresden seemed as far away as Alpha Centauri, and the whole Nazi system could have been as far back as the fallen millenniums, far back as Alexander the Great. The rain, the flowers, the trees, the river, it almost seemed to wash away the past, and Gus felt almost that life had just started again when he rescued Belle from the plane. Yet despite all that, Gus was afraid to admit that the Nazi ideology was wrong. Would be like, for him, knocking down the pillars that his life had been built on. And also, deep down inside, he knew that if Hitler's doctrines were not authentically the best system, then he had no reasonable argument for the things he'd done. All that death, even now he could smell it in his nostrils. He could hear the screams, see the despair on the faces, and could see the contrast between the healthy, smartly dressed Nazi camp officials and the malnourished, pitiful, empty, shabby clothed Jews, communists, Jehovah's Witnesses, gypsies, homosexuals and the rest. He thought back to the day he had executed 7 people who tried to escape from a work party. Some had begged for mercy before he dispatched them with a pistol shot. The 7th, though, was different and brave to the last. Even in the enemy, Gustav makes a respected courage. But the words of that middle-aged Polish Jew had rung around in the dark caves of his memory, a voice that just would not go. No, Nazi scum, I am a Polish Jew and proud of it. You may end my life now with a single pistol shot, but God, he sees it all, and he will remember.